Welcome to Uncover the Human, where every conversation revolves around enhancing all the connections in our lives.
Whether that's with our families, co-workers, or even ourselves.
When we can be our authentic selves, magic happens. This is Alex Cullimore.
And this is Christina Amigoni.
Let's dive in. Welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. Here we are with just Christina and I. It's another just host episode. We need to come up with a snappy name for it.
It doesn't use the word just, since it is one of our change traps.
Yeah, we're not changing anything. We're just identifying that this is
yes.
how it is. We are limited to exclusively us. I think it's justified just.
Justified just. It was actually our friend Gail that once told me, and like, take just out of that sentence. I think I can't remember what I said. Like, oh, I just do this. And she's like, it's not just. You do that. And you do it very well. So take just out of the sentence.
That's fair. Instead of our Just Host episodes, this is our host exclusives.
Exactly.
100% hosts.
I know. Oh, it's Beck and it's the two of us.
Yes. Back with our special guests, each other.
And Baby Groot.
Baby Groot. This actually kind of dovetails right into what we wanted to talk about today, which is relationships. The fact that relationships are a superpower, both for workplace and for life in general. It's something that is just necessary for us as a social species, as the fact that we are just needing community and reliant on it. And that is just something that powers us for what we want to do, for how we are.
I wonder we should make it a drinking game where every time we use the word just.
Because I used it 3 times in that sentence? Yeah.
Maybe we just tea for now. Just tea.
Oh. You got to sip.
I get to drink.
We're assuming that's tea. That is a very opaque mug. We'll never know.
It's tea for now.
Tea for now, but as we approach the noon hour, we're going to see what else gets poured into this.
Yeah. So yes, relationships. It is a very, very large topic, clearly, that we are going to narrow down to 20 minutes or less.
Yeah. Let's frame this in one of the reasons that we thought about this is that last week we got to do in person with a whole bunch of people that we've worked with on and off throughout the last couple of years, but we've mostly seen them remote, which is understandable. This is a company that is dispersed over a couple of different offices, so it's not like they see each other in person often, but they had a chance to bring one of the teams together, and we were there in attendance for that. So it was very exciting to kind of get to do something in person, which we haven't done too much of this year at all. And so you get to just do that and kind of see what happened. And one of the interesting things was just the first 15 minutes of the day where suddenly I said it.
Sorry, I got a drink.
I don't have any tea left, so here we are. You're gonna have to drink for both of us. Well, I think that was a justified just. Again, I'm going to justify that one because it was just the first 15 minutes. I think I'm identifying that this was within that very specific time frame was identifiable how important relationships were and how the fact that everybody got in the room and suddenly we're greeting each other. They hadn't seen each other for a bit. There's been the occasional movement between departments of people, and so these people were sometimes meeting their coworkers in person for the first time. And so there was this just moments of people greeting each other, even though they've worked with each other for all of this year. They got to actually meet in person.
No,
choking Christina. I'm drowning you in justs.
All right, I'm back. It's just tea.
Is it?
It is for now. It definitely is.
Just for now?
But yeah, it was really, really cool to see them in person. Not for us, but also see just themselves. It is really hard to eliminate just from language.
I think these are not the justs we're talking about usually.
They're not. They're not the justs we're talking about. But I remember one of them actually pointed out, first of all, I remember hearing people actually say how they had worked together for 7-8 years and had never been in person before, which to me was just, unheard of. I couldn't even comprehend that. And then other ones that even provided the feedback to just really hard to say to not say just to realize, and it is a filler. That's the problem. To realize that I think it was one of the guys there that said, "Wow, like now that I've met these people in person, or this one person, like I can't be mad at him anymore because he's a human." And so
Yeah.
he's no longer just a screen, or he's no longer an email. He's no longer a title. He's no longer, a name that, yeah, like I assume there's a human behind it, but I don't know the human. So it's easy to kind of disregard and be mad at. And now it's a lot more difficult. It's going to be a lot more difficult to be mad at this person from now on.
It is kind of incredible to see somebody in 3D the first time. We've all been getting used to remote work so much with the pandemic and getting used to so many Zoom calls. You get so used to seeing people at exactly like shoulder height framing all the time. And so you never have any idea how tall these people are, what they look like in side profile, who are
Mhm.
they really, and what do they look like when it's not just deadpan facing a camera straight on. And so that alone is this physical marker that you notice that is just different. Then I'm just gonna keep doing it. It's all over the place. Can't get it
I'm
out.
out of tea, so
This
the,
lasted
the
all three
drinking is
minutes into the
done.
episode. Uh, but it is this physical thing that you notice people differently than you've seen them, even if you've seen them a dozen times on camera, which is not always common either. Some people are not on camera.
Mhm.
But when you have seen them in this flat 2D space, you suddenly see them as this full human being and you get to know them. And that was something that was noted many times over the course of doing the leadership classes last year, where people realizing, oh, I can pick up the phone and talk to this person. I now
Yeah.
know them. I have an idea of who they are. And it was incredible to see we'd always plan things like, it's a three days of sessions, but on the first night, everybody has a scheduled dinner. And of course, it can be tiring after a long day to feel like there's another event. I have to go do more. I'm already traveling. I'm already tired. I have to go mix and mingle, and that is fair to be tired by that, but it is always incredible how different people show up on the second day for having had the time just to lay down their arms, lay down the masks a little bit and talk about things outside of work, like, oh, how many kids do you have? What are you interested in? What are your hobbies? Get to know people beyond the scope of work that you share.
Yeah, it's so true. There's so much just magic that happens.
Just magic.
Just magic. That happens in the room. I remember the first 15, 20 minutes when people were coming into the room and greeting each other and getting to know especially each other a little bit more, especially if they hadn't met before, or they hadn't met in a long time in person, because they talk to each other every week, multiple times a day, multiple times a week. But it was incredible. You could just feel the
You just feel
human
it.
energy. You just feel you could feel the energy of the connections happening. And so if we think about energy as Einstein has proved that we are made of energy, there's an energy exchange. And all sorts of scientists have since then doubled down on that and like looked for evidence of the energy exchange between humans. But you can feel it. Like I could feel that energy even standing on the other side of the room as they were entering and greeting each other, and it was just incredible.
It
It was
was just
incredible, not
incredible.
just. It was completely
It
incredible.
was just exclusively
It
incredible
was
and no
a hundred
more.
percent wholeheartedly incredible.
It's funny you mentioned that because there's definitely lots of studies that have been done on things like you could think about brain waves. You stick all those stickers to your head, and then you can actually measure brain waves of just energy coming out of your head. So it's clearly like beyond the visible realm. But one interesting thing is that we believe this fairly easily when we hear it about like plants. As
Mhm.
there's lots of research
Yep.
now, and like trees kind of share information with each other. There's
Mhm.
understanding of when there's fires or dangers. There's some kind of ability to note and obviously we can't communicate with them, but we can notice the changes in behavior, and there are actually kind of an interplay and a communication that goes on between things that are seemingly inanimate or don't have that capability. And we can sometimes, I think, believe that easier than we believe for some reason that humans also would have a similar just ability to interact. And when we notice it, sometimes we will identify it like as emotional knowledge, where we walk in, we're like, oh, this person seems like they're in a bad place, or they seem angry today, they seem happy today, they seem whatever it is. You can notice some of the vibe, and that's obviously somewhat reliant on things like facial expressions, and somewhat we get a feeling that that's kind of what's
Mhm.
happening, and it's easier to read in person, especially as you start to pay attention to it. But we simultaneously know that and don't always believe it,
Mhm.
when that can be such an influential piece, because I think we fall into that measurability trap where we feel like, well, I mean, how much does it matter?
Mhm.
How do you measure that? You
Yeah.
notice that it changes things. You notice that like we said, will say, "Oh, I can talk to this person now. Oh, I realize
Yeah.
that it would be very easy just to reach out to that person. It's not just
Yeah.
a name on a Teams call."
Yeah.
So there is an impact. And it's because it's hard to measure, it doesn't mean there's not an impact or that it's not a huge impact. And I think we fall into that trap a lot of like, well, we need to have this be proven. And
Mhm.
the proof's in the pudding. Everybody
Yeah.
feels it, everybody notices it in their own life. And then somehow, because it's so hard to measure, we don't feel like we can look for that in other
Mhm.
places or assume that it's happening or try and encourage it or have that be worthwhile, because we're all spending our time trying to justify, oh, how do I justify travel expenses for,
Yes.
15 people to get in person? And I
Mhm.
understand the need to justify costs. It's not that you should just, willy-nilly throw things everywhere, but does make it harder when there's something that's hard to measure but really impactful, like building in-person relationships, when we have to justify that and try and get a dollar amount out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is incredible because if you think about anything outside of business, really, I mean, pretty much anything else outside of business, you will never have to justify the expense of a sports team practicing together and spending time together, ever. Like you're not gonna have a football team where they live in different places and they all train at home. They're a little piece, and then they come together just for games. It's not a thing. It's not even a thing that crosses anybody's mind. But for some reason in business, we've lost that. For some reason in business, that no longer applies. Humans no longer have to actually be physically together to learn how to work with each other. And even if they're not physically together, there's such a an uphill battle to justify teamwork, to justify
Hmm.
teams actually getting to know each other, people actually having to build relationships before they can be accountable and dependent on each other and communicate and collaborate. It's almost as this, oh, it's written on paper that now you're a team, so start acting like it. And then when 6 months down the line, things are broken. Well, let's throw a process in, or let's change a process, or let's move people around when you're not actually addressing the core issue. And the core issue is the team was never became a team. There was never an investment in relationship building, which is literally only almost the only thing that matters.
Hmm.
If there's a problem with the bottom line, if there's a problem with things are not working out, if there's a problem, a challenge, there's no innovation or no problem solving or anything like that. Honestly, like the first thing that we need to look at is collaboration. What is happening at the relationship level of the human to human? And
I think
that's
that's a
where the
perfect
broken pieces are going to be.
perfect way of describing it. Just think about like any team when something eventually goes wrong, as it will, or somebody has something they have to take care of in their family and they no longer can be part of the team, or for at least for a temporary time, they just can't do the function they were asked to do. Do you have a team that looks around and says, man, I hope somebody picks up the slack? Or do you have a team that all jumps in because they care about that person? They
Mhm.
would want to be cared about in
Exactly.
the same way, and they all jump in
Yeah.
and make sure that what needs to get done is done. And that person has to step out for a bit, doesn't feel the stress of leaving the team behind, and that they just make sure they're supporting them. That's where a team can thrive. Or if they don't have those relationships, then it becomes this game of kind of hot potato of like, okay, who's going to pick that up
Mhm.
then? Who's going
Yeah.
to do this? And it's
Yeah.
obviously kind of the two ends of the spectrum, but you can see how there would be shades of gray in that, where there's a little bit of hot potato, but eventually we'll pick it up, or a little bit more like, yeah, we want to support you, and it's hard to jump into this. And I like the team analogy with football as well, or with any sports team, because you usually have a fairly set roster for at least a season. I mean, there's
Mhm.
changes here and there, but most of
Yeah.
the time there's kind of trades in between the seasons, and then the seasons people tend to stay more or less in the same teams, and that gives you a chance to build that up. And I think the dark side of relationships in the corporate sense is that there isn't a sense of seasons, and there is a sense of precariousness. Not sure what the if that is an adjective. Um, because you can have rounds of layoffs. You can have just suddenly a team shift. You can have an
Mhm.
executive decide to change the org structure, and now you're working in a different departments. Even if you aren't like moved out of the organization, you're moved off the team. And it's not that there aren't good reasons to do that, but that kind of shifting does create hesitation in building those strong relationships, because you don't know how long it's going to last. And you don't know if you can like, are you going to invest the time that it will take to create
Mhm.
that relationship when in 2 months you're going to be asked to create a whole set of new ones?
Mhm.
Does it matter whether you get to know this person or not? And it can be a real drag on starting those relationships. And so people start to feel like, well, it doesn't matter if we team build or not. And if that starts to permeate the organization, you're going to have all those collaboration issues you're talking about. You
Mhm.
start to have the feeling of, and it's perfectly natural to not do that investment. But those are the challenges that we have to be aware of in leadership, to not create the situation in which we are instilling a kind of a malaise towards relationships.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it's ironic to me because a lot of times there's the after effect. So a team is created on paper. They're told, please come together and collaborate and create consistency across 6, 9, 12, 1 year later, whatever the time before, the next shift happens comes around and like, oh, well, they still didn't come together. They're still not collaborating. There's still no consistency across. So let's bring them together in person so that they can actually get to know each other and create the boundary, that, not boundary,
Bond?
the bond. Thank you. The opposite of boundaries.
The opposite of a boundary.
Exactly. That
Sorry,
bond.
Wes.
And all it takes is like, okay, can we shift those two? And what if you actually invest in creating the bond when you formed a team on paper, not 12 months after they didn't do what they were supposed to and they didn't come together on their own when there's really no effort in coming together whatsoever?
Mhm. And that's again one thing that we think about is trying to align incentives with what we're trying to accomplish. Like if we want
Yeah.
people to work together, where are the incentives at? Are they actually incentivized to do that? Are they
Yeah.
incentivized to work together? Are your measures of success team based, or are they individually based to where push comes to shove and you need to try and make yourself safe for the next round of layoffs or a performance review? You default to pointing to things that are individually based. It's understandable to try and rate people individually, but you're not going to get the behaviors that are collaborative if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And if we come back to the in person, which we're not advocating for, 5 days in the office, some sort of strict, I need to see your butt in the seat and the back of your head, or I don't believe you're working thing. Also, because
Mhm.
there is a lot of data that shows that just because somebody is in the office, that doesn't actually mean they're collaborating or
Mhm.
being productive or working. And I have witnessed that in many offices where I've literally see people not speak to each other for 5 days and look at Facebook for 40 hours a week. So
Mhm.
that's not it. It's not about that piece. It's really about making the investment and the effort into bringing people together in a way that makes sense and so that they understand the value. And also not after the fact. So not after there's been a 1 year, of not winning any games. And so, oh, maybe, we should have the team come together in person and practice together. But let's go through a whole year of seeing if they can show up for games and win on their own first.
Yeah.
uh that never happens anywhere else except for in business, and then we get all, there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of other things that happen to fix those things. But there's actual evidence, there's neuroscience, and there's all sorts of other scientific terms that I don't really know, evidence that are being studied on how the energy that we bring actually emanates 3 to 5 feet outside of us. So if we go back to everybody's in the same room, think about how much energy of 20 people is being exchanged in that room. if each one of the 22 people is emanating whatever energy they're feeling 3 to 5 feet outside of themselves. That's what happens. That's the magic that we can witness when we see it happen.
I think that's I'd like to just tie those 2 points together because I think that you absolutely know we're not advocating for like time in the office. It has to be incredibly intentional time spent,
Yes.
like being getting together. It's just there is an interplay and an exchange of energy with people around, and you just kind of feel that. However, that's a double-edged sword because if you're just forcing people to come to the office and everybody's resentful about it and they're all
Yeah.
sitting next to
Mhm.
each other but just
Mhm.
angry that they were asked to be in the office and have to go through a commute and there's
Yeah.
no reason for it because there's still a bunch of people who are half remote or they still have to communicate with a different office, so they're still just dialing into a Teams call that now costs them 2 hours of their life and a commute there and back and et cetera, et cetera. And those are all absolutely legitimate frustrations. Now you've got just a pile of people sitting and exchanging frustration.
Yes.
You can absolutely build some
Yes.
negative energy there
Yeah.
for resentment to the organization and resentment to being asked to be doing these things. And when it's not
Mhm.
clear why you need to be there, other than feeling like exactly what you said, I need to see the back of your head to see if you're
Yeah.
working,
Yeah.
which is just a weird, surveillance that people are going to feel just judged all the time anyway.
Yeah.
That's not going to be a super cohesive for great work, um, super conducive for great work. You can actually exchange the other energy. So I think there's a real deliberation that needs to be put into these.
Mhm.
Make these times where people are together something where they do get to have some social time together, where they really are building that bond and it is a positive experience. Then you could get a real full force multiplier of having that in-person effect. But if you're just doing it for the hell of it, or if you think it's just what will happen to keep people near each other, you're missing the value and you're going to miss the opportunity in front
Mhm.
of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's something to say with figuring out that frequency, because that energy does continue past being in person, so it is carried forward. That closeness, that new perspective of the people that you were with, and those relationships does carry forward, but it's not infinite. So it can be once every 10 years or once a year, or whatever the cadence that sometimes we run into is, because it does run out. We've been, I noticed that when during last week, because we with specifically four of the people, we've been with them in person several times. Well, maybe not several, but more than once in the last
Mhm.
couple of years, separately, not necessarily together. And then when we had a meeting on Thursday where they were still together and we were remote, the exchange between us and them was very different from the past weeks when we had all been remote. And these were
Mhm.
people that we had seen in person in the past.
Mhm.
It just hadn't been over a year for most of them. And so that renewal needs to happen. I was just, you know, t- trying to connect with a friend of mine, Lauren, and we live 20, 30 minutes away from each other. And it's been, between life and sicknesses and normal things, it's been really hard to get together in person. And so we ended up having a FaceTime call last weekend. But part of accepting that this is going to be enough was to actually go through the grieving of the fact that we live 20 minutes away from each other. And in my mind, it's still ridiculous that we couldn't figure out how to get together in person. And now for that day, we were both really exhausted. So it was it was a way for us to show up better for each other, to not have to drive and deal with the rain. It was a dreary, gray day. So for that specific day, it was a necessary thing and it worked out great. And now I still feel that pressure of, like, you still live 20 minutes away and there's no reason why we can't see each other more than every 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to kind of just admit then where we might be falling, and it's good that you have that kind of relationship where you can address that out loud. Just say
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is kind of ridiculous. And
Yes.
at that point, it becomes kind of funny when you can acknowledge
It
something like
does.
that. Then you can both be like, okay, this is ridiculous. Let's change
Yes.
how we're approaching this.
Yes. Exactly. And let's be okay that for today, this is what we're doing. And
Yeah,
it's better
that
than not having any contact whatsoever. So,
I also like that example because it does prove that it is a good example of making the conscious choice and having that intentionality. Because
mhm.
like, yeah, this truly it will be a burden today to for us, just given the weeks that we've both had, given whatever we're facing. Like it really will be tiring and a lot of extra time that we don't have a ton of extra energy for right now. It's not that the intention is to throw the relationship aside, but it is that currently, and that's a good acknowledgement. That's one thing that
Mhm.
I think that is easy to get caught up on when we try and say like, what's better, hybrid, remote, or in person. Eh, None
It
of them. Like
depends.
all of it depends on
Exactly.
when you need it,
Yes.
what you need it. There's going to be times
Yes.
where it works, times where it doesn't. If you're not absorbing that nuance, if you're not allowing
Yes.
yourself to be intentional about it, you're going to get it wrong
Yes.
either way.
Exactly. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a one size fits every situation for every team, for every three people. It really depends on what's necessary, what's the best for now. I mean, in the case of Lauren and I, just the fact that we could spend more time talking to each other because we weren't driving to see each other, that was the benefit,
Mhm.
and we could, and so we added extra time together without having to lose it communing because we had other commitments that we couldn't move around our time together. But that acknowledgement, I think, was huge, and I hadn't even thought about it. But even like being in a situation when one person is feeling the need to come together in person, and the other one is not, but there's no acknowledgement of that. There's no actually speaking out. I think that also causes distance. It causes resentment. It causes the relationship to start eroding because it doesn't have to be a reciprocal thought, but just being able to say, "Hey, this sucks for me," and
Mhm.
having either the empathy or the compassion or the validation that it sucks for the other person too. That just allows to just process that and move past it.
Yeah. So I agree. There's just the ability to state that out loud is sometimes enough, and that's a huge portion of like listening to people and just letting them have a moment to say what works and doesn't work about that. A will give you just some good insights on what you might need to
Mm-hmm.
change because there might be
Yeah.
something that does need to change. Even if it was working for a while, it might need to change. And B, it just has a chance for people to listen, which again builds that relationship. So you have the trust to be able to go through some of the harder times where you have to push through things that are less
Yeah.
pleasant or that would be that are less than ideal. So if we wanted to leave people with intentional things they could do to create relationship building, what would you say? What are good things to think about when we want to create intentional relationship building moments?
I would say don't take it for granted.
Hmm.
So don't take relationships for granted. Relationships, I was just thinking about a metaphor, and if I were a sketch artist, I could, and I'm not sure the AI, maybe AI can create this for me. I'll see when I find a minute, I'll see what I create. But I was thinking about how relationships are a little bit like a bridge. Well, they are bridges. They're bridges between people. And just like a bridge, if you maintain it, then you can still use the bridge. You can walk on it. You can cross it. You can meet in the middle, whatever is needed. But you have to maintain bridges, any type of bridge, whether it's a wooden bridge or a concrete bridge or whatever type of bridge, you have to maintain it. Because if you let it go, then it starts eroding. And if it erodes, what happens, which is what could happen in relationships if you don't invest in them and you don't maintain them, when it erodes, then the next time you try to walk on it, you could be falling all the way down to, the bottom of the canyon. Or it could be, like an Indiana Jones type of bridge where it's like now you're swinging because all the pieces of wood have fallen out and the rope is breaking. And then we all know the analogy of burning bridges. Now, those are where you intentionally burn the bridges and you're like, yep, nope, don't want to walk across anymore. So I'm going to set this on fire. There's that third option too, but that's intentional. So the first two are intentional. You can intentionally burn bridges or accidentally and then go figure it out and, figure out if it's a bridge that you want to rebuild. You can
Mhm.
intentionally maintain it. The middle ground of just expecting the bridge to still be there with neglect, without investment, without the effort, well, that is where, unfortunately, it's probably where the loneliness pandemic is comes from right now globally. It's because of that assumption that we don't have to make the investment, that the bridge is there and I can walk on it whenever I feel like it. And right now, I don't feel like walking on it. And the problem is that the effort to actually maintain the bridge, just like anything else, is way lower than the effort to have to rebuild a bridge when it has eroded. And so that's kind of the shift to to do. I'm not sure I came up with any type kind of tips for people. But it's one of those things like maybe do an inventory. I mean, we have our podcast guest, Chris, who, has started this movement on conversations. Maybe look at an inventory and figure out like which bridges am I letting erode?
Hmm.
And what can I do there to maintain them? Which bridges are completely gone because I can't even walk on them anymore? Do I want them to be gone or is there some rebuilding there? And then really look into those pieces of work relationships, life relationships, anything in between. What bridges do I still want to be able to cross on and what can I do there? And then be open and be vulnerable and say like, hey, if the maintenance is, hey, we need to get together more often than once every blue moon when the stars align and it's Capricorn is on retrograde and we have a blue, a red, and an orange moon all at the same time, and somebody else told us to come and be in the same room.
Hmm.
So, communicate that and make the effort and then not take it for granted. I think that's probably the biggest piece. It's like you can't take it for granted. The bridge is gonna go away.
I think that's a really good metaphor for it. I love the bridge metaphor. Or bridges erode over time, whether they're used or not, it's just going to get weathered away. So we do decide what you want to do. I think intentionality is a huge thing I heard in all of that. Is are you going to be intentional about making sure that it is maintained, or are you going to be intentional about crossing it a few
Mm-hmm.
times to make sure it's
Yeah.
there, to make sure that it's reinforced,
Yeah.
to keep it alive, keep it well. And I think that last piece really stands out. Taking risks. It will feel like a risk, perhaps, to go do that, reaching out, to be honest about what you need to be, to venture out into the vulnerable space of saying, this isn't working for me, or hey, I'd like to try this, or hey, can we meet up a little bit more often? It's not easy, but it's definitely necessary in all personal
Mm-hmm.
relationships. And it reminds me of the risk that we feel like at work so much of well, we're not talking about work right now. Are we poorly using time, or hey, should we be
Mm-hmm.
talking about this? And we're very incentivized to look at the work problem. And being able to take a step back and see the relationship building as part of that solution
Mm-hmm.
takes a risk of your internally to go jump in and say, no, this is more important right now, or no, I'm going to reach out and just have a social call, or we're going to have a happy
Mm-hmm.
hour just because that's feels necessary, and being willing to take a leap of faith on that and say, yeah, even though we might be looked at like, why are you having a fun lunch right now? This is in the middle of a work day, whatever other leftover corporate gremlins we have that would tell us not
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
this. Being able to step past that and take the risk of, you know what, I think this is going to be a worthwhile investment, even if we can't immediately see the outcome, which if you're looking for it, you generally will see some immediate
Yeah.
outcome, I think. But even if you don't see it, and even if you don't know exactly what builds from what, trusting that that is helpful and looking back on our own relationships and seeing where that has been helpful might give us the boost to go jump into that and say, hey, when I had this and when I took that risk, that actually really turned out well. Maybe I need to lean into that. So maybe there's some historical inventory, present inventory, and continual vulnerability to go step into relationships
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are excellent point. And that inventory and that vulnerability may actually give you insight on the bridges that you want to let erode.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
if you put yourself out there and you say like, hey, this is not working for me, and you're not getting back somebody that is willing to maintain the bridge and walk on it, then let it go. Let the bridge go. But now
It's
you
kind of like,
know. Now it's not this maybe if I had done more moment.
yeah, that's true. Give you some comfort, give you some acceptance.
Yeah.
It reminds me of kind of like juggling. You can try and juggle, it becomes more and more difficult the more balls you have in the air. And you're going to spend
Hmm.
less and less time on each one because you don't
Yeah.
have the time. If you have like
Yeah.
50
Yeah.
balls in the air, you got to throw them pretty high. You got to get them at a really long distance. Same as having like 50 bridges.
Yeah.
How much time do you realistically
Yeah.
have and energy do you have to keep up 50 bridges?
Hmm.
Likely you won't have the time to keep those as
Yeah.
deep. They won't all be deep, and they can't be deep
Mm-mm.
just because we're physically constrained by time and energy and how much we have to put into that. So where do you
Yeah.
really want to put that? Get intentional
Yeah.
with that.
Yep. Exactly. And make sure you've got those bridges. I mean,
Hmm.
you need at least a few.
Oh yeah. Oh, you
You don't need
definitely need
50.
them. Just know which ones that you can invest the time in. You'll
Exactly.
have you'll have 50 bridges, but which ones are the ones
Yes.
to really upkeep? Which ones need the
Yep.
most attention and should have the most
Exactly.
attention that will help you
Get your
and help
two,
them?
get your three, get your four, five, whatever it is that don't isolate you into an island. because now they're all eroding.
Yeah.
And now you gotta wait for Harrison Ford to come over and hope to rescue you.
So go forth, have some intentional relationships.
Good luck.
Good luck.
And use the word just.
Always. Repeatedly until you are floating away with how much tea you've drank.
Just listen to this. Thanks for listening.